Joining us now, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, you've been a vocal critic, asking a lot of questions about what's going on in Ukraine, saying the American people aren't getting the full story about what is actually possible there. Wrote a piece that's gotten a lot of attention where you break down some of the math on munitions, our ability to produce, what they actually need over there. Senator Lindsey Graham was on the show last week and took issue with some of what you've written. Here's a bit of that.
So, with all due respect to Senator Vance, he's wrong. We were told within 4 days Kyiv would fall.
But is he wrong about the math?
Yeah,
is he wrong about the production?
He's wrong about the whole concept that we can't deal with multiple problems.
Okay, so obviously the Senate Armed Services Committee has this memo out saying it's not just about the U.S. There are 20 plus other countries that are contributing, and so the math doesn't add up.
Yeah, so it's interesting that Senate Armed Services Committee memo actually makes my argument for me, because they say that if the Europeans step up production by the end of 2024, and if the Russians don't radically increase production from where they are right now, then Russia will still have a 3-to-1 advantage over the Ukrainians. And again, that's not now, that's by the end of the year. That's almost a full year from now. I find that when these guys try to rebut the argument, they often end up making it for me, Shannon. The argument that I'm making is quite simple. It's not that we don't admire the courageousness of the Ukrainians. We certainly do. It's that America is stretched too thin. We do not have the industrial capacity to support a war in Ukraine, a war in Israel, potentially a war in East Asia if the Chinese invade Taiwan. So America has to pick and choose. And by the way, Shannon, some of the very people who shipped America's manufacturing base overseas to China in the first place, who weakened our ability to manufacture our own weapons, are now the same people who saying we can get involved in 3 wars at once. The math doesn't make sense. We're stretched too thin. We've got to focus. And the last point I'll make on this is, if we focus on East Asia, if we focus on containing the Chinese, the Europeans can step up in Europe. Germany still, after Donald Trump demanded it, still doesn't spend 2% of GDP on defense. A lot of the NATO countries have allowed their own industrial might to atrophy. So why are Americans subsidizing European security? We should be focused on our own problems, and that's mostly China.
Okay, a couple of things there.
Sure.
That memo also cites the commander of the Indo-Pacific region and says we can manage the munitions. In a way, you're talking about having multiple fronts going. We can do that. The more dangerous situation is to let Putin feel like he gets a win in Ukraine, and that emboldens Xi in that particular region.
Well, Shannon, I'm a child of, 2003, and I remember when generals stepped up and said that our war policy in 2003 was a joke, and all of them had their careers ruined. So I think we have to look at this honestly as policymakers and ask ourselves the tough questions. Unfortunately, you have to ask yourself, is China going to be more dissuaded by us thumping our chest and acting tough in Europe, or are they going to be more dissuaded by us having the weapons necessary to prevent them from invading Taiwan? My argument is the Chinese are focused on real power. They're not focused on how tough people talk on TV or how strong our alleged resolve is. They're focused on how strong we actually are. And to be strong enough to push back against the Chinese, we've got to focus there. And right now, we're stretched too thin.
What about the argument as well that Putin will go beyond Ukraine? And if he does and touches on NATO territory, we are then obligated and pulled in. So the argument is invest now, help Ukraine now. Don't let our troops get pulled into an Article 5 situation.
Sure. So I understand this argument, Shannon, but unfortunately, I don't think it really passes muster. So people who want us to put limitless resources into Ukraine, they want us to believe 2 things at once. On the one hand, they want us to believe the Ukrainians are on the verge of victory in the far eastern part of Ukraine. On the other hand, they want us to believe that Vladimir Putin is about to march all the way to Paris. You can't believe both of those things at the same time. And the reality is the Ukrainians have showed that Putin is a lot weaker than people feared. And importantly, they've shown that if the Europeans are willing to step up and take more responsibility for their own defense, they can handle Putin. Let us focus on China.
Okay, this new aid package, which you voted against,
Sure,
also includes aid for Israel, which you were clearly for.
Yep.
We've got a new video out with a couple of hostages. One of them is an Israeli American. Do you feel like this administration is doing the wisest, the best, the most that it can to get all hostages released?
No, I don't, Shannon. Look, if you want to get these hostages released, you've got to, first of all, enable Israel to actually finish the job. And second of all, put America's diplomatic weight behind and on Hamas, right? Pressure Hamas to release these hostages. Don't use America's diplomatic leverage to effectively cause the Israelis to pull back here. I think it's really shameful and shows, frankly, that a lot of folks don't respect the United States of America, that we still have citizens that are being held hostage, and our president, instead of focusing on getting those hostages back, is focused on micromanaging one of our allies' war efforts, I guess so that he can placate these crazy people who are protesting on college campuses. But it's such a confused policy, and it makes people, I think, recognize that America, with Joe Biden at the helm, is unfortunately too weak.
You referenced and we'll discuss more of that with Senator Murphy coming up, the other side of that conversation, but you referenced the campuses. Some in your party are calling for the National Guard, for the president to activate them. Others very much have the worry of what happened at Kent State. No American wants a repeat of that. How should this administration be responding to these protests?
Well, look, I don't know if you need to call in the National Guard. Maybe you just call in the police, right? This is often framed as a free speech debate. Everyone accepts that there are time, place, and manner restrictions. These guys have the right to peacefully protest, even if we criticize the message. They do not have the right to set up tent cities on our public spaces and turn our cities into garbage dumps. That is what I think we should not allow, and I think the police should be able to handle that job pretty easily.
Okay, we'll watch and see, because that doesn't look like it's calming down anytime soon. I want to ask you about a New York Times piece, lengthy piece on you yesterday. Talked about your relationship to the Trumps. They talk about your evolution from calling him loathsome and an idiot to somebody who, frankly, is being floated as a VP pick to join his ticket. Here's a sample of that piece. David Frum, a Trump critic and a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, who's known Vance for years, described the senator as an intelligent man with an extraordinary life story who has, quote, sunk to the depths of political degradation. Washington Post says you're going to the same negative place that you once criticized Trump for going. Now, he has not changed over the last few years. He's the same guy we've been knowing for a long time. So what's changed with you that you're okay with the behavior and you're supporting him and maybe joining his ticket?
Well, Shana, look, the simple fact is the policies and the results were really there. We had low inflation, we had rising wages, and we had a world that wasn't on fire. And now, after 4 years, 3 years of Joe Biden, we have rising inflation, a stagnating economy, and it seems like a crisis in every single sector of the world. If you can't look at the 4-year accomplishment of Donald Trump and say, from the perspective of 2015, I was wrong. I didn't think he would be a good president. He was a great president. That's not about, sinking to political degradation. That's looking at reality and recognizing that Donald Trump was a success. And I do think that, look, we have to make this point to a lot of Americans, including some who didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2020, that the results were good and we could have a growing economy and a peaceful world if we just bring back Donald Trump for round 2.
Are you being vetted? Are you having conversations about joining the ticket?
I talked to President Trump a lot. We're very close. I've never spoken to him about being vice president, so I assume that a lot of this is media speculation. Of course, if he asked me, I'd have to think seriously about it, because I think it's really important that he win. The world is on fire, and I sort of see Donald Trump as a bit of a fireman.
Okay. Thanks so much, Senator. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.